Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
Welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, here with my friend, co-host Josh Matotek, and here with our special guest today, back for a part 2, actually, first repeat of the year, Mr. Josh Landry, aka Low Spirit. Dude, we're stoked to have you.
I'm stoked to be back on here, actually. It's like kind of like a full circle like moment, because I think the first podcast that we did, I didn't have any music out, and then
Nope.
That's right, because we mostly were just talking about like TikTok.
Yeah, and then life
production.
Yeah, life has changed for me so much since then. So that's going to be fun.
Well, it's really funny. I went back and checked. You were driving in the car back from, I think, Virginia. It was something like that.
It was Long Island, New York.
Oh, okay. You were in Virginia whenever we were on the phone.
Yep.
That's what it was. And then you told us at the end you were changing to Low Spirit.
Yeah.
You hadn't even done it yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. I remember all that now.
Yeah.
Because the podcast was on a delay. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll just make sure that this goes out after you change all your handles. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, my TikTok was called Sad Songs Only. Sometimes I forget that was my TikTok name. And some people still comment on my stuff, and they'll be like, Sad Songs Only, never forget. And I'm just like, no, let's forget. But no, it's
please.
Honestly, it's really cool though. The fact that people like have genuinely been like following what I do like for that long. Because I mean, whenever you work in music, like we've all worked in music, like you like bust your ass, and no one cares forever. And so it's like, it's weird. It's a very weird, confusing yet like humbling feeling to have people that care now. And I don't know, like you're like, what am I doing that's like different or better now than like what I was like for all these years?
Well,
but
and it's also cool. It's kind of a badge of honor for the people that know the Sad Songs Only like portion of your career,
right? Yeah,
and then that people that like only know the Low Spirit portion of your career.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but so much has happened. Like it's just crazy.
Oh yeah, dude! I feel like you hit the ground running whenever you dropped your first song as Low Spirit, and like ever since then, I feel like also you've come out with some heaters after heaters after heaters, and like co-writing with friends like Aaron Pace, and like doing all those. And
I love Aaron to bits, dude. Speaking of Aaron, I'd like have to pause and talk about him for just a second, because we wrote this song that's not even out yet, but I just finished tracking vocals for it. It's probably the biggest project file I've ever made in my life. And my rendering all of that to give to somebody else for mix and everything has been absolutely terrible, because there was like 100, and I think I had 112 BGV tracks alone, like like just like choir stacks and stuff. But anyway, the song is probably the best song that I've ever like written and probably will ever release. And it was the first thing that Aaron and I ever wrote together when he came over to my apartment last year, and we just sat down. I sort of like trauma dumped for like 2 or 3 hours, and then we wrote this song in like an hour. And I was like anytime I listened to it, I was just like too triggered or like too worried about like what my mother would think of it, funny enough, like and I just didn't touch it. Like I couldn't finish it, so it just sat on my hard drive for like a year, and then I came back to it a month ago, and it was just piano and a vocal, and I was like, this song fucking rips. I need to finish it. So I did, and then now I'm just like, holy crap! Like, it's definitely the best song I have, and next to Mind of Mine, which is another one that I did with Aaron at my apartment. That dude's the truth. So my whole point on stopping on Aaron Pace is to say that I'm very fortunate to know him, and I'm very fortunate to have written with him. And
he's also hilarious.
He is hilarious, and he kind of looks like Russ. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's great because I get to call him Russ and make Russ jokes, and he gets upset, and then he makes jokes about me that I can't mention on the podcast, and then I get sad about that. And
speaking of Aaron Pace, Aaron Pace asks, have you ever had collaborators have dreams about you, or literally just quote lyrics from unreleased tracks at you?
Yes, and yes. My most prominent dreams, funny enough, if I work long enough, and if I work too much, like on this song, for example, I probably spent around 80 to 100 hours on tracking and editing vocals, and I got to the point where like I started dreaming. Like I would work all day at my desk, tuning vocals and editing vocals, and then I would go to bed. And then as soon as like I would actually fall asleep, I would dream that I was right back at my desk, like tuning and editing vocals. Has that ever happened to you guys? And then the next day you like wake up to tune and edit vocals, and then it just feels like this like never ending thing.
That hasn't happened to me, but what has happened to me, which is probably just as frustrating, is I have had many dreams where I'm sitting down and I'm writing with somebody.
Yeah.
And the song is really good.
Dude.
And then by the time I get up and I get out of bed, it's gone.
Dude.
And I can't remember what the song was. I'm literally writing songs in your sleep.
Dude, I've had that too.
That is frustrating.
There have been times where I've passed out, and in my dream, I remember this song that was like clearly it was me. Like it was my voice. I remember hearing it and being like, damn, this is crazy. And
it wasn't a different song either.
No. And then I woke up, and then I would remember the melody, and I'd be like, oh, cool, I'm going to like voice memo that tomorrow, which is the worst mistake you could ever make because you're not going to do it.
Never do that.
So
on the moment.
So I would wake up in the morning and be like, oh, what was it? And then it just never comes back. And I'm just like too tired and in a weird lucid state when this happens to me to like pull out my voice memo and just be like, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. Because that's how it always
works. But yeah, dude.
So that happened to me just enough times that I, on my phone, here, I'll show you. On my phone, I have a widget right here.
Yeah.
That's literally tap to record.
Can you set that?
Yeah. It's an app called Otter.
Dude, that's amazing. I need to start doing that.
So I literally just slide over, bam.
I need to start doing that because, it's kind of crazy because sometimes even when I'm fully awake, my friends and I all joke about this, like, since now we know what's going on with me, like, we call it mold brain.
Yeah.
Where I have something like hit me in the head and be like, oh, that's great. And then like literally like 2 seconds later, I forget. So I've had like difficulties with memory and stuff like that. So even just between like taking the time to get from the initial idea that I have in a moment to the app to the record button, sometimes I'll lose it in that 3 seconds.
Yeah, as simple as just tap go. And it also does something where if you're talking, it will it'll write out all the words.
That's dope too.
That you're speaking. So that like if you need to like understand yourself later or so it's pretty cool. That was something that helped me because I've been like scheduling I've been trying to like do this thing where I found that here there's a lot of people that write really cool that never have the opportunity to write outside of just like by themselves, and I kind of bring them all together and give them opportunity to at least write with each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've been trying to prep for a lot of that stuff, and that's where that's come super in handy as like melody ideas or chord progression ideas.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like a caveman when it comes to technology sometimes, and sounds surprising considering like what I do on the production side, but like trust me, like there's a lot of like Stone Age shit that I do
Dude,
when it comes to like production.
You were 100% not alone in that, because I have realized that I'm not that great with computers. If it's not
me either. I literally Lee will ask me. He's like,
it's outside of like Activity Monitor. Like I can check Activity Monitor. I can reformat hard drives. I can
not me.
I can boot in safe mode and like or recovery mode, and like that's about as far as I get. Dude. Like I was able to do all like the troubleshooting on my girlfriend's computer, and we took it to the Apple store, and I told him what I did, and he was like, well, that's what I was going to do. And I was like, that's great. But then sometimes whenever specifically when I'm working with Lee, he'll be like, why'd you do it like that?
Bruh.
You could just do this. And I'm like, I could do that?
See, my thing about that is
what do you mean I could just do that?
I'm just like, look, even if you think it's the hard way, it's part of my creative process. And like, this is like how I'm comfortable doing it. There's one thing I have for sure learned by working with a ton of different people throughout the years, and whether that be like a studio partner or you're going and like co-producing something with someone, everyone does things differently, and everyone's going to ask you why the hell you do things the way that you do. And that just proves to me that there is no like wrong way to produce anything. Like there just isn't. Like,
dude, I remember I was watching this interview with Baines, and I forget where it was or what it was, but he was like being asked something to the effect of like, what's your workflow, or like how did you get your workflow to be so fast? Because they were talking about how like whenever like there was one song that he did with Thug where like they recorded the whole song in like 9 minutes or like 11 minutes or something like that.
That's crazy.
And they're like, how do you do that? And he goes, well, it doesn't matter what I do or how I do it. What matters is that you have a workflow.
Yeah.
You know, and like that was something that I heard, like, you know, that's literally one sentence. And I was like, it all makes sense now. Like, it doesn't matter like what you do. You know, what matters is,
dude,
like how long it takes and the product, the final product that you get.
I'll be straight up and say, like, to contribute back to the idea of like me technologically being a caveman, like my entire rig, like, so Lee and I worked together forever. And when I got like a MacBook Pro so that I could just start like doing top line like gigs for people and just start writing vocals for people, that's what I did from like 2018 to like 2019. Lee basically helped me build like just like a basic whatever like template, and Lee was the one who like installed all of my plugins, like literally routed like out like my drum VST and everything else, and I kept that as a template, and then I just would go in and change things and like rearrange like my chains or different things. I would just like experiment with things and find what I liked that basically made your general fundamental things like sound appealing to me. And it's funny because like I still have the first thing I ever bounced by myself, and it sounds horrible. And it's crazy because the template that I use today is that exact same template. I just tweak things every time I worked in it, and it got to a point where like now I just open up that template, still the same one, just different EQ moves, different compression moves, different like effect moves, and like different starting tones and things like that. And it's gotten to the point where like I can basically start and finish a song from the right to the master in like 4 hours.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's funny because like I've had the exact opposite approach. Like I used to have a really like robust template, like similar to like what you and Lee are running.
Yeah.
Because like I've been working in Lee's template a little bit more lately, and it took me a minute to like kind of understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And it just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yep.
And now my starting template in Ableton is one drum rack, an 808, a Reese bass, 4 empty guitar tracks with no effects on them.
Yeah.
And empty synth tracks.
See, but I think that's dope because you know like what your taste is from the jump, and so everything that you make, like some people will kind of dog on it and be like, oh, like everything that this person does like sounds kind of the same, but I think that defines your style and your sound, and it becomes like this recognizable thing where people are like, oh, Josh Matotek did that. Or like, oh, like Lee did that, or oh, Josh did that.
My consistency isn't so much with my template; it's with the sounds that I
exactly. It's same with me.
I started really organizing like all of my, because like I know what samples I want. Like I remember most of the names of, you know, like I want this snare, that kick. You know? Like the Cruel Sumo kick. It's awesome, and it's like it would take me so long to get through all those folders. I was like, why don't I just copy all of my most used samples to one folder?
Yeah.
And so I started doing that, and it's like, it kind of like dawned on me. I was like, my consistency is with the sounds that I curate, not so much just like my template, you know?
Yeah.
That's like, I remember I sent something to my one friend, and it was like a pop rock track. He was like, what's funny is like, I haven't heard you do anything like this in a minute, but it still sounds like you did it. And I was like, going through it, and I was like, yeah, because like these are like the same kind of things that like I like, and so therefore they're in this song because I like this song.
Yeah, people get flack for using templates, but I think people misunderstand, like templates are just supposed to save you time that you would have spent later on the project. Like
100%.
And if you're like, okay, I'm going to build this kind of tone, I know I'm going to have this for rhythm guitars, this for lead guitars, this for clean guitars, like it's just like, I might as well open a project that already has those things loaded and they're already leveled exactly as I'm going to level them in the end. Maybe things will change here or there, but like, you know, it's not bad to have something that helps you save time later and makes moves for you that you're already going to make. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And when you're doing like a larger record also, that just, to me, that just makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you start with maybe like 2 songs, get a rough template for the record of that, what, you know, establish the sound of the record. Obviously things are going to change from song to song just naturally by like tracking things differently.
Yeah.
But like you're going to make similar moves. The drums are going to probably sound pretty similar if it's a rock situation. The guitars are probably going to sound pretty similar, and the lead vocal is probably going to need to sound pretty similar. So right there is 3/4 of your mix.
Right.
If you do that, this saves you so much more time, especially over 10 or 12 songs.
Dude, yeah. And I mean, when you're like a small fish in a big pond, like most of us have experience with, and you're competing to have a career amongst all of these other people that are making these like phenomenal records, like the one thing that you can do to like put something in your pocket to incentivize people to come work for you or work with you on is like saving time, like fast, like that's huge. And I mean, template working for me, like I was able to do a full length record from nothing, no music. Like we wrote the record and finished the record in 3 weeks. I think it was like 12 or like 14 songs. And like, that's like edits, writes, everything. And so it's just like, dude, if I didn't have the workflow that I have and I didn't use like the template things that I had to my benefit, like that would have never gotten done.
That's something that I was going to talk about. So like, I noticed as I started making my template smaller and smaller, what ended up changing is all of my hotkeys. So all of my hotkeys are like, a lot of people have like processes or like things that they do pretty frequently set to their hotkeys. Yeah. Almost all of mine are either for editing faster or for organization.
Yep.
So like I have a hotkey that will make group tracks in Cubase, and then I set the same thing in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
So it'll do a routing folder and route all the audio to it. And so like that way, like whenever I'm like producing, I can quickly group things. I render a lot of my sounds when I'm producing anyway. So it's like I don't really care too much about
That's
a lot of like the more bus compression, and
that's definitely
effects,
another thing to have in your pocket as a producer is like committing to sounds and running. Like if you can't make up your mind on a sound, that's where people start falling asleep in the back of the room, and then you're like dead in the water.
Yeah,
like it's so important to do that. So yeah.
I even have preference presets. So like if I'm producing, I have a different set of preferences in Cubase, where if I'm tracking vocals, it's different to speed things up. And like, so just navigating from your keyboard like makes things so much faster. And that's been really cool. Pro Tools and Cubase both have the option where instead of having to set your like where you start by clicking up in the ruler, like if you don't want to link your timeline and whatever edit selection, if you don't want to link your timeline and edit, then they both have a process that you can map where it'll begin playback from the selected event. So whenever I'm tracking vocals now, once I get a good take, I drag it down, and then I could press Option Space, and then it starts playback from that take, so they could hear it and then start singing.
Oh yeah, that's pretty dope.
And like, so like just finding little things like that have made me so much faster. I think that that's probably like the most important part, like trying to be invisible while you're working with people.
Yeah, exactly. So that less steps to get something done is definitely a plus. I mean, in the same breath is basically the same idea as just having a template in general. You know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, no, that's great, dude.
Well, let's talk about firstly, do you think that I think it's really interesting that you have such a strong sound, and also it's a testament to you and Aaron, speaking of Aaron working together, of that you had released, I want to say 2 songs prior to Mind of Mine. Yeah. And you've released songs since that Aaron hasn't been on. Yeah. And but they all feel consistent.
See, that's okay. I'm so glad that you said that, because I feel the opposite. I'm just like, my shit feels like it is all over the place, but that's because
it feels like it's from the same artist.
Yeah, mixer me and producer me like feel very like different about that. Artist me is kind of just like whatever. Anything I do is just gonna sound like me, because I'm, I have my voice, and I'm kind of the glue to everything.
Sure.
I think that there's I don't know. I think that there's something to admire. Like whenever we look at literally any other genre, like every song that an artist puts out is going to have, the production isn't going to sound similar. And then because the production isn't similar, the mix also isn't going to be similar. Right. And so like, I think like whenever you're more like in like the hard rock territory, I actually admire it whenever artists have different sonics going from song to song, because it shows that they care more about the song than they do simply about consistency. And I think ultimately like the most important part is the song.
It's cohesive across all of the songs, which is amazing to me. That's the part that's amazing to me. It doesn't sound like so drastic that it's like, this is a totally different artist.
Yeah.
That's, I mean? Especially with your stuff.
That's reassuring and really nice to hear, honestly, because I lose sleep over that genuinely. Because I'm like, I
wouldn't, because like you're doing
I did my first song, which was called Blue. I did that one by myself, everything down to the mix. I think Lee mastered that one actually, and then Everyone's a Secret was the second song that I put out, and I did everything on that from the right to the mix. I think Lee mastered that one too. And then the third one was Mind of Mine, which was definitely like way different sonically. But to be honest, all 3 of them were way different from each other, because the first one was like way more of like a weird alt kind of like hard rock, like Marriage. And the second song was pretty straight down the middle rock. And then the third song was like, I don't even know. All pop, but not. So like they all just like lived in totally different lanes sonically. And like, to me, I was just like, are people going to get confused by this? Like, I don't know. Like, cause again, like it's so hard to take the producer hat off and put the artist hat on. Like there's no way for me to like toggle between those like different mindsets and those different lenses. Like, so it's
100%.
I've always had such a difficult time since I started releasing stuff with Low Spirit because of that, because I'm so used to being like the producer and having everything kind of live in a line or live like, you know.
Yeah. I think as like, you know, you have a lane and you're weaving like either to the left slightly or to the right slightly, but you're not going so far outside of that pocket that it doesn't feel like the same thing. I even think, and this is wild to say, I even think Hollow,
I was about to say that's kind of the oddball.
More recent songs is the oddball, but they did a good job on the production of like, it's obviously not your normal thing.
I didn't do anything,
but it's still,
I didn't do anything other than the vocal. And the dope part was,
it still kind of doesn't feel out of pocket in my opinion, it doesn't feel out of pocket in your catalog.
Yeah.
As far as like, it has your voice on it. It has your sound. It's kind of mixed, like to a brighter version of one of your songs.
You know what's crazy is that so Dabin and Kaiwachi produced the track. They had like a general outline of what they wanted to do. I just sang on it and tracked all the vocals and like mixed the vocal kind of. But Tom Norris mixed the song, which is the dude who does like all the Weekend and like Millennium and like, he's like this like massive mixer, and I had no idea at all until he like sent me the mix, and I was like, oh, who did it? And then he told me Tom Norris, and I was like, who's Tom Norris? And I like look it up, and I'm just like, oh, okay. But it's kind of crazy because to me, and I'm sure you guys probably feel the same way, EDM is very much like cleaned up. It's like polished to death, like and super shiny. Everything just sounds like super, just like, I don't know, I feel like hi-fi is a terrible word to use, but you get
no that's exactly what
you get what I'm saying, like, but that mix wasn't
like
that mix was not, which is why it surprised me, because it was kind of crunchy and it was kind of dark, and
it was very dark for an EDM mix for sure.
Yeah, you'll notice this weird thing where sometimes EDM is super, super hi-fi, and then other times it's really not bright at all. And you could kind of tell like when somebody has a lot of experience doing EDM, they know how to make it feel bright without it actually being bright, because when they take it to the club, you can't have mixes that bright or else everybody's going to be very upset.
It's going to hurt, right? It's going to hurt. And I know for sure that part of it being dark had to be my fault, because I mix vocals very bright, and I compress vocals so hard that like my sibilants can hurt unless you make my moves that I make at the end, which is a trick that Lee taught me forever ago with a pull tech, where you're just kind of rolling off a little bit. So like I kind of have like, I'll push a lot in and then kind of just tame a lot on the way out, and then tame again on the master on the way out, which I know that they didn't do. So I'm sure he was just like, oh, these are so bright.
He was like, what in the world is this?
We're just going to roll off this whole thing. But
but I mean, no, but he did it. It's wild that it didn't feel like, obviously it's an EDM song, but I'll say again, like, it didn't feel so out of pocket that it's like, oh, this still feels like a Low Spirit song.
Yeah, which is crazy. By the way, definitely one of the coolest moments of my life. So when I got the invite to do the collab, I almost turned it down because I was like, I just don't, like, I don't know what to do with like tracks like this, like, because I'm a rock writer. I was kind of intimidated and felt like I was just going to write a really bad song. And so funny enough, the first draft I sent them was a really bad song. So I ended up scrapping the whole thing, and then came back from Salt Lake and then wrote that hook and then finished the song around that. And then it came out, and Dabin went on tour, played this venue in Madison, Wisconsin called the Armory. and sold it out. It was like 8,000 people. And I don't know if you guys saw that video that I posted from that show. But
the drone cam
it
footage?
was like
was that one?
Dude, it was like a dream come true moment where it was just like at least 6,000 of those people were singing my hook, and it was just like it's like one of those things where like when your career is predominantly based on putting music out on the internet, which is all of my career has been. I haven't played a show, I haven't done any of that. Like you kind of don't feel like any of it's real. Like you kind of make up any excuse to believe it's not real and that people still don't care about you, which is still how I feel today. But watching that video was just like an absolutely crazy pivotal moment for me where I was like, oh, okay, like I can do this. Like I can.
Have you had people recognize you?
Okay, so this is actually, I'm really glad you asked that because
I'll be honest, I haven't met a single person recently that doesn't know.
So
they doesn't at least know like who you are and what you look like. They're like, oh yeah, it's that dude with the blonde hair from
dude.
TikTok.
So I think I walk around with resting bitch face or something, dude, because like I must not be approachable because I have all of these people that supposedly saw me somewhere in public and they don't come up to me and they don't say anything, but then they go and like message me on Facebook or comment on like a post and they're like, oh, like for example, this just happened to me the other day, like 3 days ago. I went to Starbucks and I picked up my daily drink and I get in my car. I get in my car. And I get 5 minutes down the road and I got like this creepy message that was like, I just saw you at Starbucks. Like, I didn't want to like bother you or something. And like, I've never met this person in real life. And I was just like, it's way weirder for you to message me and say that than it would have been for you to just come up and be like, oh, hey, like, you know what I mean? And also I welcome that because again, like I've built it up in my mind that none of this is real. Like so like people,
it's hyper validating.
So people coming up to me and saying like, oh, I like your music is like, that means everything to me because then I'm like, oh shit, like, okay, this is real. Like that inspires me to go and like work harder, you know, and really kind of gives me like a bit of happiness. Like it makes me feel good, you know, like that everything that I've worked hard for, like people are listening, you know, like, but people don't do that. And so again, there was another 2 scenarios I can think of off the top of my head. When I was in Salt Lake City producing the last record that I was going to produce for another artist in August, somebody commented and was like, oh, I saw you at the Smiths, which is like the grocery store in Saratoga Springs, Utah. And I was like, okay, well, they definitely saw me because like there's only one of these in town. So, because I was in the middle of nowhere, but I was like, why don't these people come say hi to me? Like, do I just look scary? Like inherently, is it because I have like tattoos?
I think
I don't know.
I think so. It's a my mind says that. So the people who would know who you are people that are online a decent amount. You know, you'd probably agree with that. Your following is generally an online people that are kind of, I wouldn't say chronically online, but pretty much a lot online. And they see, and they see the craziest stuff of people getting bombarded. And I think they're just like, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's also different too, because you're in music. I think that there's this effect whenever you're popular because of something like art, for example, or like because you're popular because of, you know, like maybe skits that you do or something like that. People understand that like that's an outlet for you and it's something that you enjoy doing, right? But you're not like going on TikTok and like making these like super like introspective things on your life, right? So like the people who follow you because 1, either you're pretty, or 2, because they like your music. And my one friend Jay, he's launching an artist project. He blew up on TikTok as like this like goth boy influencer.
That's awesome.
And he lives in Detroit, and he has so many stories of people coming up to him and just saying the weirdest things.
Dude,
and he's like, this is why I need to start dropping music. I need to be known as someone who does music, because right now I am just an influencer. And what makes it even worse is his girlfriend has a really good following, and she's also doing the same thing as him. And so it's kind of like, they'll just be out and about, and they have people coming up to them and just kind of like saying really strange things. And it's like, look, like, we post these videos.
I would welcome, I would welcome the strange things. I'd welcome anything at this point to make me feel, because like you guys say stuff like a second ago where you were like, oh, it's what happens like when you're like popular, and it's just like, I still don't feel popular. Like, I just don't. I don't feel like anyone gives a fuck about like what I'm doing. It's so hard for me to genuinely feel that. I don't.
That's something that a lot of people go through, though, dude. Like, do you listen to And the Writer Is at all? It's Ross Golan's podcast, really, and so he interviews a bunch of writers. His very like first episode was with Benny Blanco. And he was asking me, he was like, if you could go back and look at 18-year-old Benny, what's something that you would tell him? And he was like, I would celebrate every single win that I got. Because it was like, it wasn't until he was like super, super big and like he was already like rich that he was like, oh, I guess I should celebrate now. Because his entire career, he felt like nobody gave a shit, despite him being on radio constantly. So it's like, if you feel this way now, you're gonna be huge, selling out arenas, and you're gonna be like, maybe
I should celebrate this.
Maybe it's only these people who care. And,
yeah, dude, that's such a valid point to make. That definitely sounds like me, because it's like, dude, I've had a lot of things that are worth celebrating. Like I think it's just so easy when like other people have the tendency to make you feel like big wins aren't big wins. Like for example, like when I got to like 500,000 followers on TikTok, like no one celebrated that with me, because it was like, oh well, like that's awesome, but like so and so has like 3.4 million followers or whatever. Like it's just like you're just like, oh well, like I guess it's not that special. Like it's weird because you can internalize like, oh, that's kind of messed up, and this is like a special thing. Like you're still like, oh, like I still need the validation of other people recognizing what I did is like a really awesome thing. I hate that about myself. That's one thing that I'm like absolutely trying to squash is allowing people to kind of put me in that headspace, and for me to allow myself to continue comparing myself to like my peers and other people, because obviously like I'm managed by Luke, who manages Teddy, and Teddy is like far more successful than I am. And for a while, like, that used to like kind of bother me, like to a degree where I was just like, I always kind of felt like, oh, well, Luke is probably, like only delegating his time to me like when he has time because Teddy's more important, or like, you know what I mean? Like things like that, like where it was just like a toxic mindset, where now it's just like, I don't really care if he calls me anymore. I'm just like, I'm just going to keep making music, and like, even like I'll send him things that I'm stoked on when I finish them, and he'll kind of poke holes in them and make me think about things differently. And that used to like be like, oh, well, I guess the song's not good. But now I'm just like, nope, I think it's great. I'm stoked. You work for me. Push it. Like,
yeah.
So like,
exactly, bro.
So I kind of had to start, like, I had to really learn to start appreciating myself and like my internal compass, like as a musician, an artist, a producer. Like I had to start trusting myself way more than I was, because I need to figure out how to validate myself. And not depend so much on external validation to like, keep me going and like make me happy.
We were just talking about this with Aaron yesterday, and it's like I was talking about how like I'm pretty good at a lot of things.
Before you say that, I just need to take a second and say that Aaron doesn't know what he's got, and he also doesn't recognize that he won't be where he is for very long. I feel like I need to say that.
Bro, I feel like Aaron is going to be one of those guys that like in a few years we're going to be like, yeah, remember when we like had a good conversation with him? It's crazy that he's doing all this wild shit now,
I'm telling you, I think, and he can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure that he'll watch this and he'll feel attacked by me saying this, but I feel like he thinks that he has to be like the guy that does everything start to finish on a song that does extraordinarily well. And he thinks that that is going to put legs on his career and maybe like help elevate him into rooms or with projects that he really, really wants to work on. But I'm like, dude, no, like you're such a good writer and you're such a good producer. Like just work with everybody and anybody. You never know what's going to happen. Like all he has to do is continue existing and doing the great work that he's doing now. And it's going to happen for him. And my only purpose and point of saying that is that I feel like he puts so much pressure on himself and like he probably just like I don't. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like I feel like he works.
Yeah. I 100%.
He works too hard in his mind, and it puts him in this place where he's just like, I'm never gonna get a win, and I'm just like, dude, you've already got one coming. Like, and I swear it's like once he comes out and like just like works on some more stuff and like gets on to the next project, he's gonna do something great. I already know it.
I feel like though that thought is we all have that moment where we're like where we can't see what everybody. I feel like even with you, dude, it's like the moment that you said I'm about to drop new music under this name, I was like, oh well, it's gonna crush.
It's weird though.
Obviously, it's going to crush.
We all,
but you wouldn't have no idea. Yeah, you would not think that.
We all don't know what we have. I think that's kind of a cool thing though, because if we all knew what we were good at and we were like overly confident in it, I don't think any of us would be friends. I think it takes a special kind of loser to like commiserate and like make really great friendships and relationships in music, because like all of us are you have to be a loser forever to get one win, and I don't know. I just believe in everybody that I've met like so hard, but I'm telling you, like, I don't know. There's just something special. Like I knew it as soon as I worked with Aaron for an hour, and then that was it. And I was just like, how have I never worked with him? And why is it a thing where it's just like, I know like 2 bands that have like done a record with him, but I'm like, this dude's the GOAT. I just,
dude, I love working with Aaron. Like there's a lot of times whenever like he'll pull things out that like I would never think of, and I feel like he kind of feels the same way with some of my ideas. But one of my favorite things is whenever like it was just me and him, like we had like this mumble track, and we were like, all right, we need lyrics, and like we both thought about everything in the same exact way, and we literally like finished lyrics for a song in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it was so fast, and I was like, "This is great." Like I feel like I'm in my happy place. Right
it's cool,
now. And like I want to, But the whole reason why I brought him up was yesterday when we were talking to him on the podcast. We were talking about how sometimes you like tend to forget that like you can just do things. Like you don't have to work on that record if you don't want to. Like you don't have to work on this type of music if you don't want to. Like you can just do things. And I brought it up because I was talking about how weird it is, like the sense of identity. Like when you work in music, it's like right now, like I'm in a weird position where I've spent so much time like getting good at a lot of things.
Yeah,
I'm scared to push myself as one thing or another because I'm horrified of being known as that guy.
Yeah.
And he's definitely felt that way before.
Being like, I am the metal guy, or I'm the pop songwriter guy, or I'm the dude that makes hip hop beats.
To interject, I think it's weird that he's ever done a metal record ever, to be honest. Because
and they slap too.
Yeah, and that's the hilarious part to me is that I don't think that he's a one-sided thing at all. But I I had this conversation literally yesterday where I was just like, man, like I was listening to the song that I just finished writing, and I was like showing Colin, my drummer, and I was like, yeah, it's weird to think that guy did a Left to Suffer record. Like it's like, like,
and it's one of the heaviest things. Like, it's freaking pick scrapes going down, and just like,
it's very weird to me, but it's awesome.
Well, ultimately, like what makes someone a good writer is the undeniability of whatever they create.
Yeah.
And so it's like whenever you're trying to write pop songs, like the whole purpose is trying to find those undeniable moments, And so whenever you're doing metal, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, well, like here's the genre. Here are all the things that are absolutely going to be super sick. So we're going to do all of these things, And, but yeah, like, I don't know. It's just funny how a lot of times we'll be in a position where it's like, man, like, I don't want to do that. Or like, I don't, or like, I'm scared of doing this or whatever. And it's like, you can just do whatever you want. Like everybody is always in control, It's like,
as long as you have the money to pay your bills, like, bro, you're Gucci, man. Just chill.
Like you could do literally whatever you want, especially when you're an artist. And I think a lot of people end up, becoming their own worst enemy in that aspect, where it's like they end up like boxing themselves in over time.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, this is definitely what people want. And it's like, well, you're not people. You don't know what they
exactly
want.
Yeah, that's
what they want is you being a great artist.
That's a very, very
artist.
That's a very, very, very sick thing to say. Because I've been at that crossroads more than once, like when it comes to like writing something or making a piece of music, where I'm just like, oh, I feel like people don't want this, but people probably want this. And exactly, I'm not people. So how the hell do I know? I don't. I should just not care, and I should just make whatever comes natural to me in that moment and not think about any sort of like pandering, or you know what I mean?
And another thing that's really interesting that I think a lot of like rock musicians can like kind of well, maybe I'm not saying that right. Something that I think a lot of rock musicians should probably like look at more often is how pop music is so weird right now. Like pop music is very weird. Like you'll have one artist where like they'll do like an R&B song, and then they do like a song with like a Charlie Hanson country guitar loop on it. Then they'll do another one which is like super over the top, like almost EDM, and it's like their fans respond to each one the same exact way because they're a fan of that artist. They aren't a fan of, whatever subgenre that song ends up being, because you're not going to change. Like every song that you do, like we could put you on a bro country, like Nickelback fusion song, and like you're still going to sound exactly like you, and you put that song out and your fans are going to be like, dude, this is so sick because you sound really good.
I'm not going to lie. I thought my fans were going to absolutely hate Hollow. I did. Like I thought so. If you guys noticed, I put out my own version of that song.
Which is also cool
for that very reason, because I was so worried about Hollow like being such a polarizing thing to like my listeners that they weren't going to care about it, and that it was like only going to be an EDM catering thing. But what I didn't stop and think about was that like the hook was universal, and like what I wrote in the song is still absolutely 100% without a doubt me. And even if the landscape changes and the track is totally different, everyone that was a fan of my music was still able to appreciate that song, which lived in a totally different
100%.
world. And even like people that were like in their 60s and 70s, you know what I mean? Which is like crazy.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not people.
I've been in this. Yeah, exactly. I've been in this kick recently of I just try to get better at songwriting and seeing stuff from different perspectives. I was like, so what's an interesting way that I could kind of learn from people who write? So I've been listening to a lot of a podcast from people who write like novels. So I was like, how do people who write novels think about writing? Like, that's a totally different way. Like, especially like, so I found a podcast called Writing Excuses. and it's an older podcast. It's been going on since like 2006 or something like that. And it's these three dudes. This dude named Brandon Sanderson. If you read like fantasy, he's big in the like high fantasy, like 400,000 word, like huge, thick fantasy novels. This dude named Dan, who writes horror, and another dude who writes a comedy comic strip that's online. And they were all even saying what we were talking about, the same thing. It's like, you're gonna write, think about this, you're gonna write at least 4 to 5 bad books.
Yeah.
Think about a book, dude.
Yeah.
That's like 40 to 100,000 words.
I can,
and it's gonna be bad.
I can write 3.5 minutes.
You're not gonna release it.
Yeah, I can write 3.5 minutes of a turd of a song and feel defeated because it's a lot of hours of work. But I couldn't imagine 400,000 words of turd. That would be bad.
So, and this is the other thing. He said I wrote 2 books that he ended up eventually getting published. But after those 2 books that people consider really, really good, he wrote 9 books that were bad and he trashed.
Dude, that's
insane.
How much time was it between? I mean, that had to be years of work.
Yeah, like 9 years, 10 years.
You want to know something insane? So I saw a bunch of the Bond films, one on HBO, and I was like, oh, dude, this is my childhood. Like, we're watching them. And so I started looking things up. I was like, when were the Bond books written? You know, like, how long did all this take? Are they still going on? Who's writing them? All that, you know? So I'm like scrolling through Wikipedia page to Wikipedia page. The dude who wrote James Bond, first of all, he was like some crazy, like, British, like, Navy intelligence dude, and named GoldenEye off of an operation that he designed in case if like Germany invaded through one section of Britain. Anyway, that's irrelevant. What's relevant
crazy though
is that this dude retired and sat down and he wrote Dr. No in like a month.
Yeah.
In like a month. Like, he just sat down and he was just like, yeah, dude, like, I got this job. He was writing for like a news publication. And he was like, look, I just helped win the war. Okay. So what you're going to help me do is get 3 months at my home. And I think the Bahamas. And so he would go there and like, he would write during the summers. And yeah, dude, like the James Bond series, like he wrote so fast. And I just thought that was so inspiring, you know, like he just sat down and he was like, it's time to work. I'm going to plow through it. And
it's crazy because that's exactly how songwriting goes, because I feel like the most amount of time that I've ever spent on a piece of music was some of my worst work. And I feel like some of my best work was when I just sat down and did it in an hour.
Yeah. Like I think, and that's the thing. I think both of those are very good examples and are juxtapositions, a little more extreme, obviously, but like, of songwriting as well. It's like sometimes that song that you wrote 5 years ago that sucked then, you don't know how to make it not suck for another 4 years.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
So
but
that's something that
sometimes you write a song in 30 minutes and it's a banger.
Yeah.
Dude, so for a while it was like, oh, like I should be focusing on the songs that come quickly. And so I spent a lot of time on that, and I was like, cool, like I could write a good song pretty fast. But what I'm really big on now is the ideas that come really fast that you can't hear the rest of them, and then just always keep listening to them. Because the one day I was sitting down and I was just playing guitar, and I started like writing this part, and I was like, man, this would be such a good hook. And then I was like, man, this sounds like something. What does this sound like? And I realized I basically unintentionally wrote a hook for a verse that I wrote the week before, and they went into each other perfectly. And so I'm trying to get better about that, where it's like, instead of just like hammering down on time, being like, oh, I need to finish this. It's like, no, like, let's just focus on the easy ideas that come fast and like stockpiling those. And then either we can bring them up and we can finish them with other people, or who knows, maybe you'll accidentally write the rest of it at a later date.
Yeah.
You know?
That, I mean, to be honest, the song that I was talking about that I did with Pace, last year, we wrote a first verse, a chorus, and a second verse. And we wrote like this idea for a bridge, but that's all we left it at. And so I mean, the basic bones were there, but what the song ended up doing, like we tried to produce it out actually between then and now. So it's been about a year. We tried to produce it twice, and poor Aaron, he like came to produce it, and I was just like, this just isn't right. Like both times I was like, this just isn't right. It's not what it's supposed to be. And like I could tell that he was like frustrated with it. So like for me, I was like, I just put it down. I was like, whatever, it's fine. It'll happen when it happens, or it just won't, and that's okay. And like I said, I reopened like just the piano and vocal of that song a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and was just like, man, like I feel like it should just be this. And then all of a sudden, like I was sitting down with it, and I told Pace that exact thing. I was like, maybe we should just keep this a piano ballad. So he's like, okay. So he like basically like comes up with all the piano sounds and everything, and then makes a bounce and sends it to me. And when it gets to the bridge, like I instantly like heard it in my head exactly as it was supposed to be. And then I finished it, and I'm like so glad that I waited like a year to do it, because
sometimes you need fresh
perspective. It never, ever, ever would have turned out how it turned out now, which is most certainly the best song I've ever done. It would have never become that had I like tried to just make it happen quickly.
It's especially hard to get production right on like super good songs that get stuck in your head. Because if you mess it up on the first pass, like there's no shot that you're ever going to hear it in a different way.
But that unless you put it down and just don't and don't
you just walk away from it for a bit.
Because that's exactly what happened to me, because we like produced it. It was like kind of like a Zayn meets like Nick Jonas like kind of like vibe when we produced it the first time, and I was just like, this just feels like I'm just like trying to be really swaggy on a song that's like about my mom. Like it's weird. And so it just didn't feel right. And then like the second time we tried to come back to it, we like tried to make it a rock song, and I was like, no, this is just doesn't feel right. So it's just one of those things where it's like I don't know, like the right happened quickly, the bones happened quickly, and I think that that's because the song was real, and it was a lens into what I was like going through with my mother at the time. And so it just kind of poured out quick. We had a progression, we had a melody, we had the lyrics in an hour. But then it took an entire year to visualize and get the rest of the landscape out and like the rest of the arrangement down. The way it should have been the entire time. But neither one of us knew what that looked like or sounded like a year ago. So I don't know. I think my whole point is that like you never know, like there's so many things. I think we try to find like a formula, right, as producers and as songwriters. I think that like our brain naturally wants to find something that like is kind of quick, effective, and like really works and always turns out a great result. But again, this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation. There's no one way to do it. There's no one way to produce music. There's no one way to write a great song. I think that you're going to find a lot of little things that like work and like help you to integrate into your workflow to like find a great way to make something. But I think there's always going to be multiple avenues of getting from start to finish. Like, and so, Absolutely. But I totally get why you would focus on, like, you're like, oh, I should focus on the songs that come quickly because those are usually the best ones. Because I've definitely gone through that exact thing where I've been like, this should take 30 minutes, no more, to like come up with this great fucking song. And I did that for a while. And I kind of shot myself in the foot because I would come up with like this like verse chorus idea, and then like just like move on. And then I had like maybe like 20 songs that like in the moment I was like, this is sick. But now I'll like go back and listen to it in the Dropbox and be like, this wasn't that good. Like, you know, but you're like chasing that feeling.
I think it is like a really important thing, like, well, a really important like phase for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, like, I think as far as like the hierarchy of like what's important while we're working, it's like having that super, productive feeling, where you're just like flying through it and you're like, yes, this feels good, like, that's a really good thing to like really become familiar with. And then you could take a step back and be like, well, now that I'm good at that, now I could take a little bit longer and make sure that this is like super, super sick.
I think it also stems from like this revelation that you have where you're like, oh, the best songs like happen in like an hour or less. And you're like, so that's like the trick. That's what I've been missing the whole time. Cause like, I think all of us start out as like the best songs have like 100,000 tracks and are like hours of work. And it's like this really complicated thing. And we like build it up to be this crazy thing in our head. And we overwork ourselves because we feel like that's what's going to lead to a great song. And then when that doesn't churn up a bunch of great results for multiple years, you're like, oh, well, the problem is that like the best songs come quickly. That's crazy. So I should like just start chasing that. So like, it totally makes sense. Like it's a total valid, like, I think it's a rite of passage for anyone that's like an actual like songwriter or producer to like have that eureka moment. And then I think get to the end of it and be like, oh, well, maybe I'm like missing something here. And I think, again, it goes back to the book thing. You have to write 9 turds to like have a golden egg, right? Like it's just what it is. It's creativity. I don't think you can
and the more you write the crappy ones, the easier it is to write the better ones.
Right.
You start innately learning
how to avoid
what works, what doesn't, how to avoid those pitfalls.
Yeah, 100%. Writing is just weird, man. Creativity is weird, and it's gonna ebb and flow. It's gonna change with your environment, with how stressed out you are, with what you're eating, with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and like and your lens on life. I think that's probably the biggest one for me. As I like, I write about my life. That's what I do, and a lot of writers, have their own thing. Some people write about fantasy, just like in books, or some people like only write love songs. And sure, I'm sure that they stem that from their own personal experience, but I'm sure they're not like falling in love with a different person every day of the week. Like but for me, it's like it's totally dependent on what's going on in my life, who is in my life, what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, how I mitigate stress, and like all of these things like have to create like the perfect storm, if you will, for me to like have a moment that just like feels really good for me to sit down and be productive and make something. And so,
well, I was going to say we've done about an hour on songwriting. I would love to do a little bit talking about your personal life and everything like that. Dude, you moved. You've had a kid since we've last talked.
Yeah, dude.
You've like life. Speaking of life has been freaking happening to you, bro.
Dude,
life has been happening to you, bro.
That's for sure, dude. I did have a kid. His name's Rowan. He's 6 months old as of 2 days ago, which is crazy. I can't believe he's almost half.
Welcome to the dad club, bro.
Dude, yeah, thank you. Honored to be here. But yeah, it's just crazy. Like I had that. I'm sure you've had this moment where you're like, oh God, like maybe you're. How many kids do you have now?
I just have one.
You have one? Okay. How old are they?
He's 2.
2. Okay, so when he was 6 months old, you were probably at the same point that I am, where I was like, man, it's been half a year, like 18 more of these, and like they're gonna be like driving a car and like doing their own thing and like living their own life, and it's just like crazy that like half a year has already gone by, and like you're just like you start kind of like grieving. You're like, no, like this is going too fast.
Yeah. The sentiment that time flies, bro,
dude,
it's never faster. Lie. It's never faster whenever you have a small child and you're trying to savor every second with them. It's crazy how, like, bro, 2 years ago he couldn't do anything, and now I'll walk in the room, he'll go, "Hey, Dad," And like, yeah, I'm like, what? And then we'll do something and he'll go, whoa. And I'm like, bro, chill. You can't be doing that to
Dude,
me. Like giving me
I
attitude
love
and
that.
stuff like that.
That's another thing. It's like right now he can't talk, right? So like all he does is just like smile at me or giggle or like do whatever, which is fun. But I'm like, man, it's gonna be so weird when he can like talk to me, like, because when they're newborns, like, I don't know how to say this without sounding absolutely horrible, but like they don't feel like human beings, like they don't feel like people. They just feel
more. They feel similar more to like it. I agree. This is
like
a weird
pets.
thing to think about.
Like
they feel
pets.
more like a pet. They feel more like a pet than a human being until they're like honestly about like a month or so old.
Yeah,
because well, also we're further removed from it as the father figure in that situation, you know.
Yeah,
because they are more. At least with my situation, they were with my wife more. Mm-hmm. Because that's the way it works if they're breastfeeding,
Right.
And so we don't have, that's all a hands-off job for the first little while, for the most part. It's crazy.
So basically the title of this podcast is going to be Babies Aren't Humans.
Babies are pets.
Yeah. But I totally get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying,
so
dude.
My point there is like you kind of have this weird feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but like you like don't see them as like their own people yet. So you're like, I'm like scared of when he gets to that moment, like what that experience is gonna be like, and like, is he gonna like me? I don't know. He likes me a lot right now, but like. He only likes me because like I do silly dumb things with him, or I tickle his little pits and he loses his mind. But like, then is he just gonna be like, man, fuck off, Dad? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
There's a moment that I had where I realized he was becoming his own person, and it was, I have never felt both joy and sadness in equal amounts at the highest moment at the exact same time. It was such a weird juxtaposition of emotions. That is coming for you, dude. Probably in about like 2 or 3 months, honestly.
So let's be really candid here. Before he was born, I was so scared. I was like, what if I'm not a good dad? What if I don't connect to my kid? Like, what if I'm like not super empathetic or like caring or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because you don't know how you're going to be to your own child until you have one.
I was terrified. I'm like, okay, I'm taking 4.5 pills a day to just like survive. At that time, I was like, oh, like, I'm some like PTSD loony. Like, how am I going to have the spoons for a child? Like, I had no idea. And now I'm glad that all of that was like kind of proven false-ish, and now I'm taking way more than 4.5 pills a day to survive, but it is what it is. I digress. But once I like had him, well, not me personally, but once we had him, fast forward a couple of months, and it's totally life-changing, where like last night I got him to sleep like at bedtime, and like I put him down and kind of like watched him like fall asleep in my arms with like this little like bunny like stuck to his face, and like when I put him in the crib and I like walk away, I feel so bad. Like I feel sad that he's like gone to sleep, and now he's not like smiling at me and we're not hanging out anymore, and I'm like, who am I? Like who am I? Because I honestly didn't think that was going to happen. I didn't think I had the emotional spoons to like care for another human being, or like really worry about the like really worry about another human being. Like I just didn't have the spoons to do that. And now I'm just like, I so do. And it's crazy.
And it also does something to you as like from a career perspective. It does something that's like, oh, I have I'm working for this dude. Like I am in. Like,
yeah, dude.
You cannot
Also,
tell me no, because I am making sure that this little guy can eat and has a house over his head. And
so before Josh says
one way
anything,
to get you motivated is to have a child that
so
everything.
Let's talk about this, because we're all producers here. We've all made records. We've all worked for bands, and we've all had bands burn us on our pub or like whatever back end like royalty that we deserve. It's crazy because I used to let people just kind of like roll over me. Like if they did that, I'd be like, like whatever, like
sucks.
They suck, but like, it's whatever. I'm not going to do anything about it. This one band in particular, I'm not going to name any names because I don't know how this is going to play out, but this one band, they came out, and they worked with me, and I did 2 songs for them, and, did them for like dirt cheap, and did everything, wrote, played everything, mixed it, engineered it, did the whole 9. So we agree to a 30% overall royalty split on DistroKid, because of the amount of money that I did not receive up front and the amount of work that I put in and gave them. They agreed to
Makes
it.
Sense.
One of those songs actually got picked up by radio, right? Which is crazy because they were a small band with nothing, and that song got picked up by radio. As soon as they saw what the royalties were like coming from radio, they scrubbed me from DistroKid, and they completely removed me from my royalty, right? So, and then they signed to a particular record label. Won't name any names again, but
sure.
And then they bought that song out from them. So there's tens of thousands of dollars that came out of this song that I was entitled to, that I just did not receive because the band went behind my back and scrubbed me from the royalties. And now I'm like, instead of me being like, oh, that sucks, they're assholes, whatever. Now I'm like, okay, you're taking food out of my kid's mouth. That ain't going to go down like this.
Yep.
And so it totally changed my perspective on my work, because I was just like, I can't afford to roll over and just not deal with it because, I don't want the confrontation, or like, I don't, you know what I mean? I'm like, no, I don't care. Like if you're going to disrespect my kid, like then you're going to get got. And so like now we're like in 100%. We're in the process of like trying to figure all of that out. Yeah. Sure. And so you're absolutely right, because it's like, I take my work a lot more seriously now because of that. And because of him. And, even when it comes to like the music that I put out as an artist, not only as a producer, I keep him in mind where I'm like, is this going to like help me continue providing for him? Like, and as terrible as that sounds, because no one ever wants to sound like a sellout. It's like, dude, you have to do what you have to do to keep the lights on to some degree, especially when you work in music. And there's a lot of give and take, and there's risks I'm willing to take as an artist where I'm like, I really believe in that. Even if there's no real financial return on that, that's fine. At least I know I did something that I felt like I needed to do to make great art. But then there are certain things that I have to decide on where I'm like, this is a safe bet that it's going to be, something that really makes a return and like helps me provide for him.
It's going to pad that bottom line a little bit. Yeah. It's going to help pay for, I mean, I totally get it. I totally understand. It's one of those things that unless, and I'm sure Josh, you could speak to this from like not having a kid, and like it's a lot harder. It's very hard for us to like understand before, like me before having a kid, understanding like this drive to like not, you know what I mean? It's dude, like, honestly, it's a totally different world.
It's super sick because it really did like all of the things that I wasn't doing before in my career, I realized to a degree were by choice. And then once I like had my kid, I was like, okay, I do not have a choice in those things. I need to like kind of like, I need to discipline myself in those things and just do it and work harder. And once I did, it did a lot for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There is kind of a nice kick in the ass that you get when you do become a parent in terms of like buttoning down the hatches and doing what you need to do to survive. And I think all of us here will probably just be creatives for the rest of our life. And whatever happens situationally will only push us further in that direction, whether that be a good or bad thing, you know?
Yeah. 100%. 100%. This is another question, and I think it's something that I don't know. I see this sometimes of people mentioning it in your comments and stuff like that. Live stuff. Has that been in the conversation for you?
Yes. So we actually got an offer.
I see it a lot in your comments of like, oh, I would love to see you live. Oh, I'd love to see this song live. Oh, you know what I mean? Like seeing the reaction of Hollow from a EDM perspective live.
Yes. So
what does that lead to you?
We actually got an offer from a festival yesterday, which is really exciting.
Oh, that's sick.
Because that's kind of mostly what I want to do. If I committed to like full-time touring right now, that looks like 6 to 8 months away from my kid. And I don't want that right now. But also being in a position that I'm in with my health and with mold toxicity, like I have extraordinary like chronic fatigue and like shortness of breath and all of these things that would definitely like damage a performance. And so I've got to kind of wait to like see what it looks like on the other side of this. If there is another side of this, which has been kind of daunting and scary. I mean, everyone says that like I am going to come out the other side of this, but it gets hard to believe after like 9 months, you know what I mean? Of like constant chronic illness. But I'm still like pretty optimistic. They say it could take me like a year to go through detox and totally get this out of my body because of how long I've had it. And so every Tuesday I actually do IV therapy where I get like a bunch of I get like a Myers cocktail and a bunch of glutathione like pushed into my body, and then they have me go down the hall to this really crazy infrared sauna and like sweat out toxins for half an hour. And then the following day, every Wednesday, I have to go get what's called a lymphatic drainage massage, which is really, really crazy in its own right too. So I'm on top of taking all of these supplements, having to eat extraordinarily clean and do this low histamine diet. I have to do IV therapy, sweat out toxins in an infrared sauna, and do lymphatic drainage massage, which is basically where they strategically like push toxins like through your lymph nodes and your lymphatic system. And then you spend the next few days going through what's called a herx, which I'm actually experiencing right now. It's like where you kind of get like flu-like symptoms, which is basically your body like pushing out toxins and stuff. So you get like aches and like this is gonna sound kind of
pain.
Yeah, this is gonna sound kind of gross, but like your urine gets really acidic, so like it kind of like hurts. It doesn't feel great.
Burns a little bit.
And so I actually got one yesterday, and so I'm like going through that now. But I'm supposed to be going through this for a whole year before like it's out of my body.
Bro, you're gonna feel so good at the end of it though.
So yeah, dude, I mean I already feel a lot better since I started treatment, which was like in March. I was really bad off. When in fact I didn't know this was happening to me until January. I didn't know exactly what was wrong until January. And my child was born in November, and I had just gotten back from Salt Lake City, Utah, working on that album. And a couple of days before my son was born, I actually had another seizure. And then I was so dizzy I couldn't drive. So when Tori went into labor, I literally had to call my dad to come down here and like drive us to the hospital because I couldn't even do it. And while she was in labor, I was so dizzy and dealing with so much vertigo and just like weakness. I couldn't even sit up. Like I was laying on the bench next to her. Like,
Dang.
so that's how sick I was. And then it started becoming a thing where like I actually have to sleep in our guest room right now because a lot of our stuff that we have here is from our old apartment, which is contaminated with mycotoxins.
Residue. Yeah.
And so I'm basically allergic to everything I own. So I'm having to sleep in a separate room away from Tori and my kid. And I have to replace all of my studio gear, literally everything. Everything I own, I'm losing and I have to replace.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing has been a nightmare, dude. And by the time that I do get to play my first show, which is getting back to the point here. I'm definitely going to have some choice words for that audience because no one is going to know exactly how much it took me to get there. And that's definitely what I've always wanted since I was 14 years old. I've always wanted to tour. I've always wanted to play. I've always wanted to, that's what I wanted to do with my life. And it has taken me from then to now, a lot of effort. Work every day of my life trying to do this. And on top of that, like all of these health things that have happened, all of the trauma that's happened along the way, like, but I mean, especially now with like going through chronic illness and mycotoxin issues and, mold toxicity, it's like, it's so hard for me to even like picture that first show, but like, I know that I'll get there somehow, one way or another. And
my buddy is in a band. My buddy Chris is in a band, and they got in a really bad accident while they were on tour, and they all like got injured. It was a head-on collision between like their bus and a 18-wheeler, and like people died. Their drummer lost his leg.
I'm talking about the Ghost Inside, huh?
Yeah. My buddy's a guitar player.
Okay.
And so I watched him like go through that process for them as well. And I got to be at their show, their comeback show in Los Angeles, which was, that was
crazy,
insane.
I watched it online.
I cried.
Yeah, I did too. It was such an emotional thing.
It was crazy.
It
sounded so good.
Yeah, it was unbelievable what they had to endure to have that moment, and that's exactly how I feel with my situation. Where it's like, it probably won't have that profound of an emotional impact on other people, but on me, it's going to be like it took me. I think it'll be to be here. Like,
I think it'll be the same but different. I think it'll be, especially people that we're talking about, like that were with you from the early like Sad Songs Only days to the people that were there, especially the people that were there in the early days that get to go to that first show with you, is going to be such a journey.
It feels grandiose
watching you.
Yeah, it feels grandiose to say, or like dramatic maybe in a way, but like it really has felt like ever since I've like started this project, it just feels like something has tried to kill it over and over and over and over. And even in particular, like me, over and over and over. Like I've had so many close calls with what I thought was death. Like it's just, I don't know. And every time I somehow like barely escape it, or like I find my way out of it, and it's like, even if it sounds kind of crazy and like woo woo, I feel like there's a reason. There's some sort of reason, and like I'm like super determined to figure out what that is one way or another.
Yeah.
100%. Like, because again, like, between like illness and everything else, like I actually got in this really bad car accident when I was 17, where I had like a GMC Sierra truck like hit my door at a 4-way intersection or a 2-way intersection going 55. And it smashed in the whole left side of the car. And I had 3 other friends in the car, and all of them walked out with bruises and cuts and like bleeding. And I was the one who got hit. And I somehow was also the only one not wearing a seatbelt. and I walked out of that car completely unharmed. But everyone else was like really messed up, and the car was completely totaled. All the windows smashed. Like, it was.
That's crazy.
I don't know. It's just very weird. I mean, and you can go back to like my childhood. Like, we went through Hurricane Katrina and like lost everything. Like, I mean, there's just so many things that like I've had to survive that it's like getting to a point in my life where like good things are happening is really scary for me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, cause I'm just so
100%.
used to bad things happening. So
well, and let me give you this, crazy. Like, let me give you this too. Like, they did this, like, doing the festival only thing.
Yeah.
That's a perfectly, like, yes, that is such a good way to do it. Because they had to do the exact same thing, because if you think about it this way, like, they had kids and got married and stuff since that accident happened. A lot of them were single or didn't have kids whenever, you know, that time frame. And so, like, Chris, my buddy, has had multiple children since that time frame, and they are only just now getting to the point where they have just announced their first large full tour. It's that Under Oath co-headliner that they're doing. Just now getting to that point.
I could only
and so they did the festival thing for
like,
a long time.
I mean, it's got to be kind of. I mean, dude, they've got to be traumatized from what happened. I mean, it's like, that's got to be hard to commit to, like, mentally for all of them.
They've all had to work through it in their own different ways. I know Chris said Vigil had a hard time with the being in a van, like, driving thing.
Yeah,
I was going to say that, because it would be one thing if, like, it was like a super fluke thing, right? Like, they were landing from a flight and like something went wrong and there was a minor crash and they all got really messed up from it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a fluke thing, because you could sit there and you could look at aircraft statistics and be like, oh, this is still the safest form of transportation anywhere. But the fact that they were in a van or a bus, which is, you know, like just like the statistics of like road accidents are so much higher that like, I don't know if I would be able to go back out on tour after that happened to me.
Yeah. Props to them.
I really don't think I could.
For making it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like props to them. I mean, like they're insane, you know? I don't think I'd be able to do that.
It just makes me excited for, like, I know what I kind of was there and like watched everything happen with Chris. So I'm equally as excited to watch like your first thing happen, you know what I mean? Yeah. And like the pure just exhilaration and the peak of moment that's going to be like, that's one of those celebratory life moments right there that Josh was talking about.
I could see like my first show, like me having so much anxiety and adrenaline that I just like, I just come on stage and like my voice just like, oh yeah, we're gonna fucking do this thing right now. Like, I'm just gonna like sound like a fucking a clown horn, like for the first like 10 minutes until I like calm down. But yeah, no, so it will happen. Long answer short. Here's the short.
Sure.
Shows will happen. I've gotta focus on my health and really try and get to the other side of this. In fact, yes, I did move. Like you said, I moved to Tampa. And I've been here for a year, and I love it here. However, because of mold toxicity, this is the moldiest state in the country, so my allergies are terrible. So now I'm actually moving again. So at the end of June, I'm actually moving to Los Angeles. So making the move to California.
You and Lee will be back in the same place again.
Yeah,
together.
Dude, we always somehow find our way back to each other.
Just you two peas in a pod, man.
Yeah, I love him, so I'll be happy to be around him again and spend time with him. He's actually, so like I said, I had to replace all my gear, so I'm getting a new computer.
Yeah.
And because I'm again like a caveman when it comes to technology, I actually need him to help me migrate everything over. So I'm literally like paying him to like help me get all of my stuff safely over to this like new Mac Studio. And Yeah, so I'm like, he's always been my resource for those things. Or if I have a problem in Cubase, like the first thing I do is FaceTime Lee, and I'm like, hey, this is like weird shit's going on. Can you help me? And he's just like, oh yeah, it's this.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, all right, sweet. If I didn't have that lifeline, dude, I don't know what I would have done for a very long time. Like, he's definitely helped me escape some like seemingly like just like doom and gloom situations with other bands, like where I've like been on the spot and been like, I don't know what's happening. Give me 5 minutes, and then I'll like call Lee Rouse and be like, hey, I really need you to help me get out of this. And he does every time. So super grateful for him, and I'm grateful that I'll be like back in the same like city as him, and we'll be able to like power him and do shit. So
that'll be fun. So I think last segment, I want to get 2 things from you. Okay. One, what's a dope artist that people need to be paying attention to? Give you a chance to shout some people out.
Dude, okay. So no one else on earth needs to check out James Arthur, even though he's one of my favorite artists in the world, because he's already like 86th in the world on Spotify, so he's doing fine. So if
James Arthur's sick, yeah.
If I had to give a shout out to anyone else that I think people should check out right now, one of my favorite artists is still Missio, Missio. And they're like kind of like a weird, like dark alt pop kind of like duo thing. But they make seriously sick songs. There is this chick that's actually come across my TikTok recently, and I think her music is really fucking cool. Chinchilla. Have y'all seen that girl yet?
Chinchilla?
Dude. Listen to the first song, literally in her top 5. Just go on Spotify and listen to the first song and tell me it's not like the craziest thing you've ever heard. Production-wise, songwriting-wise, and just like overall, like, just like artist-wise. Like, it's interesting and it's dope. And I don't know, she just seems like a jack of all trades, and she's super weird, and I always appreciate that in artists. Like people that aren't afraid to just like kind of get weird and do weird things and be weird. Because it just makes things more fun. Everybody needs to stop being so safe.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And then, what is something from like a songwriter or production or mixing thing? What's something that you've been doing that you're like real stoked on? Like something that you found out, or some weird thing.
I stopped using amp sims.
Really?
I started. This is gonna sound very super hipster of me, but I started using straight pedals, like just straight into the pedal, straight into my interface, straight onto a channel with nothing on it. Like I've been using a ton of like fuzz and stuff like that, and just getting like these really weird sounds. And just like choosing to go with that, and then like choose other instruments for like the sake of like taking up the same kind of sonic like qualities or space that like normal bass guitars or like guitars would do. So I'll find other things to take up space like in the mid-range and things like that. So I'll use like fuzz guitars and 808s and just make like this like kind of really funky like bass synth thing out of it, and just use that as a guitar instead of like actual like amp guitars. Like it just sounds more interesting to me, and that's what I did on songs like Blue. I think, have I put out anything? Down With My Demons is another example of that. So both of those songs specifically have no amp sims. It's literally only like this crazy plasma pedal that I have, and like 808s that are just like distorted the hell and back. And that's what I used for my guitar sound. So
that's super sick. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that. That's really cool. I'm sure Matotek will also try that.
Dude, go back and
messing with weird guitar stuff.
Go back and listen to either one of those songs, like even like just like 30 seconds of like the chorus, and you'll hear exactly what I'm talking about, because it's literally only those like two things. And I just did a bunch of different takes with a bunch of different settings on the same pedal. It's literally like this. Have y'all seen that plasma pedal? It's like a game changer audio. You can like kind of see the signal being distorted on the pedal.
Those are super sick.
So that's what I use. And it's like the Jack White model, I think. It's like a $400 pedal. And it's like the most expensive thing I have on my pedal board, but it's like super worth it because it's just like all the things it can do is just like unbelievably crazy sounding to me. But yeah, so that's what I'm stoked on, is like trying to like find like newer and weirder sounds to kind of replace like your fundamental, like, guitars or like whatever, like anything I can do to sort of reach outside of the box and just get something a little bit different. Just like always gets me excited,
Heck yeah, dude. No, that's killer. Yeah, dude, I think we'll call it here an episode. It's been like an hour and a half of us just chatting. And it's always, it's always good to have you on and like just.
I hope I didn't get too carried away on like dad life and stuff. Cause I
love it. No, dude.
Every time someone asks me about my kid, like I know that I just like, I get lit up really quick and I'm just like, oh, this and this and this. Cause I've had so much. I
think it's so cool. It's good. I think it's really good for younger people or even people that are like our age to see that, like, yes, you can have a kid and still have a career.
Yeah,
yes,
especially
it's
in music.
cool to be a stoked dad and do production or songwrite or be an artist. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine.
Straight up, like, I think that was the first thing that scared me, like, when I found out that I was going to be a dad, was I was like, oh, like, because everyone thinks that, like, you can't have a music career, like, if you're going to be a dad, like, and that's what I was, like, always kind of taught when I was coming up, was, like, if that happened to me, like, my music career is over, you know what I mean? And it's just so not the case. Like, it's just not.
Yeah. It's not the case at all.
And I wish no one, like, had, like, kind of fed me that lie that, like, kind of scared me for so long. That way, like, when Tori told me she was pregnant, instead of me, like, dissociating and her, like, crying, like, I could have been excited because I just didn't know what it meant, you know what I mean? I was like, I don't know what this means, like, for my life, and everything's about to change, and is it going to be for the worse or for the better? Like, I don't know. But, like, now that I'm 6 months into it, I'm just like, dude, this is, like, the best thing ever. Like,
yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on again and once again chatting with us and stuff. Follow him at it's low.spirit, correct? If I'm correct.
Low.spirit
or is it all...
low.spirit on Instagram, and then I think the same thing on TikTok. Either way, if you just look up Low Spirit, you'll find
it. It'll be there. Check him out. Listen to him on Spotify. Run those numbers up. We gotta break Mind of Mine into the 5 million, right?
Yeah, dude.
We gotta get that into the 5 million mark.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Another celebration point for you, man.
Exactly. I should celebrate that.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me,
Josh. Of course, listeners, thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.